Hey guys, tonight we journey into a world you think you know, but trust me, you don't. This is the era of top hats and tea time, of cobblestone streets, fog-drenched alleys, and carriages rattling past gaslit shop fronts. A time we often romanticize in sepia tones, corsets, cravats, and calling cards. But beneath the satin gloves and lace curtains, the Victorian era wasn't just polished boots and moral restraint. It was, in many ways, a gauntlet of danger, a world that smelled of coal dust, sounded like coughing, and carried hidden threats in every room, every meal, every smile. Tonight's story isn't about kings or empires. You're not a baron, a duchess, or a character in a Dickens novel. No romantic walk beside the Thames, no candlelit dances in marble halls. You're just you, dropped into a time that's trying its best to modernize, and occasionally kills you while doing it. But before we step back into the soot and steam, take a second to support this strange little journey through time. Hit the like button if you find these stories help you rest, subscribe if you'd like more, and let me know in the comments what time is it where you're watching from right now. I love seeing who's falling asleep to history and from where. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft hum, and let's slip together into tonight's story, tonight's journey. Why life in the Victorian era was actually dangerous. Because here's the thing, when we think Victorian, we often think of civility, manners, elegance. But this era spanning from 1837 to 1901, under the reign of Queen Victoria, was anything but safe. It was a time of rapid change, yes, but also of widespread ignorance. Science was blooming, but superstition still held the upper hand in many homes. Medicine existed, sort of. Sanitation was a dream. Food was a gamble, and the average home, a tightly sealed trap of gas leaks, arsenic, and improperly cured wallpaper. Death didn't wait for old age in the Victorian world. It came in the form of a contaminated meat pie, a broken chimney flue, or a dress that caught fire at the wrong moment. Children vanished in factories, chimney sweeps suffocated in soot. Women fainted from corsets while crossing streets and woke up with scarlet fever. And the worst part? Half of this was considered normal. You'll wake up in a sagging bed, surrounded by damp wallpaper, walk barefoot across a cold, warped floor toward a chamber pot that hasn't been emptied in 3 days. You'll try to scrub your teeth with soot and salt, eat a breakfast made of mystery meats and milk that's barely milk, and dress yourself in clothes that smell like wet wool and impending doom. You'll breathe the soot of 10,000 chimneys. You'll drink water laced with cholera. You'll pass a surgeon's office where the tools are cleaned with a dirty rag and confident, and that's before noon. So if you're ready to travel back to the most elegant death trap in modern history, take a breath. We're going to spend the next couple of hours navigating gas lamps, lead pipes, and social expectations that could absolutely kill you. You're not rich. You're not royal. You're just one more soul trying to survive the Victorian era. And tonight you will. You open your eyes and immediately something feels wrong. The air is thick, not just heavy thick, with damp, with soot, with a musty, sour smell that clings to the back of your throat like an accusation. The light in the room is greyish, filtered through a window pane that hasn't seen proper cleaning in several decades. You're awake in the Victorian era, and your first thought is simple. What is that smell? Welcome to your morning. You're not in a manor, not in a country estate with rose gardens and servants delivering fresh tea. No. You're somewhere far more authentic. You're in a terraced house, built quickly and cheaply to house the growing working class. A narrow little place with brick walls damp from last night's rain. and a single fireplace that can't decide whether to warm the room or just fill it with smoke. The bed beneath you is less bed, and more a sagging wooden frame with a straw mattress that's slowly caving in on itself. The rough linen cover is yellowed, damp in the corners, and filled with more than straw. There are fleas, you realize, and the faint, scuttling sound near your feet. Let's just say it's best not to check under the blanket. Speaking of the blanket, it smells like wet sheep, has the texture of an itchy old rug, and weighs roughly 30 pounds. Not from warmth, from moisture. You've slept wrapped in what feels like a damp curtain that was left outside all winter and then dragged back in out of sheer habit. There's no pillow, just your arm folded awkwardly beneath your head. You try to move it and feel the pins and needles spread down your side like cold electricity. But movement has a cost. As you sit up, you hear the groan of wood beneath your feet and the unsettling creak of a floorboard that might not survive another season. Every joint in your body complains. The air is cold, but the bed's damp heat clings to you, sticky and uncomfortable. There's a fog outside, of course there is. A thick, yellow fog creeping in through the badly sealed window frame, bringing with it the scent of coal smoke and river rot. This is London, probably, or Manchester, or Birmingham. Anywhere the Industrial Revolution has set up camp and forgotten to pack soap. You try to stand. The floor is cold and gritty under your bare feet. You shuffle to the side of the room and pause to let your eyes adjust. But they already have. There's no electric light here, only the dim glow from the street beyond. And even that is filtered through grime-smeared glass and heavy fog. Your room is tiny, more cupboard than chamber. The ceiling sags slightly, stained with age and something worse. One corner is already growing a fine bloom of mold, and the wallpaper, yes, arsenic green wallpaper, because of course it is curling away from the wall like it too is trying to leave. You hear footsteps above you, a cough, a sharp, wet one, the kind of cough that doesn't sound like it's going away. Below you, someone is stoking a fire and muttering in a thick accent. Every sound is amplified by thin walls and bad plaster. There is no privacy, only the illusion of separation. And then you notice the smell again. It's not just mold, it's people. Sweat, mildew, coal smoke, chamber pots, rotting food. The air is saturated with the scent of too many bodies, packed into too small a space. It's the smell of survival barely. You glance at the corner where your chamber pot waits. Ceramic, slightly cracked, half full, covered with a wooden lid that does not do its job. You pretend you don't see it. You tell yourself you'll deal with it later. That's what everyone tells themselves, and that's why it smells like this. You move toward the window and pull back the curtain, if you can call it that. A rectangle of coarse, tattered cloth hangs limply from a rusted nail. Outside, the street is already stirring. A cart rattles past, wheels shrieking on damp stone. Someone yells. A baby cries. And somewhere, close by, a rooster tries to crow and gives up halfway through. There's no glass in the upper pane, just a hole stuffed with a wad of newspaper and what might be fabric. Or food. Either way, the wind slips through. Sharp, wet, unapologetic. You look down and see the street. Narrow, slick with mud, lined with other houses just like yours, rows and rows of identical brick boxes with leaking roofs and crooked chimneys. The cobblestones are uneven, crusted with horse manure, and already hosting a battalion of rats moving with military efficiency toward a nearby bakery. You shiver, not from cold though, that's part of it, but from the knowledge that this is just the beginning. You share the house with others. Too many others. Maybe it's your family. Maybe it's strangers. Maybe it's both. It doesn't matter. Privacy is a luxury. Silence, even more so. Every breath, every step, every cough, Every whispered argument about bread money echoes through thin walls and thicker resentment. Downstairs, someone is lighting the coal fire. You hear the sharp clink of metal against stone, the scrape of the poker, and then the smell of burning coal fills your nose, smoky, acidic, toxic. You'll breathe it all day, at home, at work, in the streets, in your dream. The fire is essential, of course, for warmth, for cooking, for warding off the creeping damp that threatens to turn every wall into a sponge. But the coal itself, it chokes the lungs, blackens the walls, shortens lifespans. Every breath is a quiet sacrifice. Your lungs feel heavy already. You reach for your clothes folded neatly beside the bed. One shirt, one pair of trousers, woolen, scratchy, cold to the touch. The shirt is yellowed and stained at the collar. The trousers are stiff with wear. There are no socks, just the hope that your shoes, wherever they are, haven't rotted through during the night. You dress in silence. The movements are automatic, practiced, tired. You button up your shirt with hands still stiff from sleep and cold. The buttons are mismatched. One is missing entirely. You tie your waistcoat loosely, shrug into a coat that smells like smoke and rain, and glance once more at the chamber pot. Not yet. You take a breath. It tastes of dust and dampness and distant illness. You hear a neighbor coughing again, harder this time, and from somewhere below a kettle whistles weakly. Not tea water. If you're lucky, it's been boiled long enough to kill whatever lived in it last week. You open the door. It creaks loudly. There's no oil for the hinges. No one can afford that. And there it is, the narrow staircase, twisting, uneven, covered in grime and shoe polish smears. The banister wobbles. The steps sag. The smell intensifies. You haven't even left the house, and already you feel dirty, cold, tired. Your head aches, your eyes sting, and there's an odd dampness in your socks, though you're not wearing any. This is the Victorian morning. Welcome to it. You make your way down the narrow stairs, careful not to slip. The wood beneath your feet is slick with age, and something else you hope is just last night's spilled broth. You steady yourself against the wall as you descend, but the wallpaper there is damp, and the texture is strangely soft, possibly mold, possibly worse. Your stomach growls. Unfortunate. Because this morning's meal, like most mornings in the Victorian era, is going to be more of a survival ritual than an enjoyable event. You pass the sitting room, though calling it that feels optimistic. No one sits here unless they absolutely have to. There's one wooden chair with a leg reinforced by a brick, and a small table stained with candle wax, soup spills, and what might be blood from a butcher's apprentice who passed out during dinner. Hard to say. In the hearth, a weak coal fire sputters. A kettle hangs over it, crusted black on the bottom, spitting angrily as water begins to warm. Not boil, just warm. The coal is wet, the fire is underfed, and you're already running late. Your host, or maybe it's your mother, your aunt, or the widowed landlady who sleeps 3 doors down, is stirring something in a pot. You try not to stare at it. The smell is somewhere between boiled oats and wet rope. It's called gruel, and it's exactly as appealing as it sounds. But it's food, sort of. She ladles a scoop into a wooden bowl and slides it across the table. There's no milk, no sugar, no spices, just greyish mush, slightly lumpy, with a thin skin forming on top. You grip the bowl with both hands and take a bite. It's hot, thankfully. Bland, tasteless, but hot. A luxury. No toast, no bacon, no butter. Definitely no eggs. Those are a Sunday treat, and only if the hens are feeling generous and the neighbour's son hasn't stolen them. You chew silently, trying to ignore the fact that the oats were probably swept from a storage floor shared with rats. Still, it's something. On better days, maybe there'd be tea, strong, black, and bitter enough to wake the dead, or at least keep you upright, long enough to reach the factory gates. But today, there's only the watered-down leftovers from yesterday's pot. You drink it anyway. And then, hygiene. Ah, yes, hygiene. A word that, in this time period, means we tried, but the plumbing disagreed. There is no bathroom, no sink, not even a proper wash basin in most homes. The closest thing to running water is a pump down the street, and in winter, it often freezes. Sometimes it runs black with contamination. No one asks why. It's better not to know. You head to the back of the house where a chipped ceramic bowl sits on a rickety table beside a pitcher of cold water. You pour a little into the bowl and splash your face. It stings, not because it's refreshing, but because it's just above freezing and smells faintly of metal and old coins. There's a sliver of soap nearby, or what used to be soap. It's mostly lard now, with some gritty grey residue and maybe a hair or two embedded in it. You rub it between your palms until a few sad bubbles appear, then rinse. You pat your face dry on the same cloth used by everyone else in the house if it's dry at all. Your skin feels raw now, but at least it's cleaner. Slightly. Now, your mouth. There is no toothbrush. There is no toothpaste. Victorian dental hygiene is more about wishful thinking than oral care. You might chew on a twig. You might rub your gums with soot, salt, or charcoal if you're fancy. Some people use vinegar. Others just hope no one gets close enough to smell the consequences. Your breath is historical. As for your teeth, they're hanging in there. Literally, toothaches are common. Infections more so. If something really goes wrong, the barber can pull it out. No anesthesia, no sterile tools, just a pair of iron pliers, a strong grip, and a bucket for the blood. But not today. You're mostly intact. For now. And now comes the matter of relief. You head out back, through the garden, past the hanging laundry, and there it is. The privy, a wooden shed, barely tall enough to stand in, tilted slightly to the left, door held closed by a bit of string and optimism. Inside, a wooden bench with a hole in it, beneath which is a pit that no one has dared look into for months. There's no toilet paper, just old newspaper, catalogue pages, or dried leaves. You do what you need to do, quickly, while trying not to breathe through your nose. The stench is biblical. The flies have already formed a welcoming committee. You exit feeling lighter, yes, but also slightly more traumatized. In some parts of the city, you might have access to a communal toilet, especially in the tenement slums. These are stone benches with shared holes and little to no privacy. You sit elbow to elbow with strangers, knees knocking, and hope no one tries to strike up a conversation. And God forbid you go outside after dark. Many simply use a chamber pot and dump it out the window in the morning. The streets run slick with waste. The phrase "Garde-à-l'eau" is shouted as a warning, but most people are too tired to move or care. If you're in a nicer part of town, you might have access to an indoor washroom, but that's still rare. And the plumbing? Still experimental. Pipes are often lead. Drainage is poor. Water sits in basins growing things you'd rather not think about. Sanitation is a theory, not a reality. As for bathing, baths happen once a week, if that. Often just once a month. For some, once a season. A full-body bath means hauling water from the pump, heating it over the fire, pouring it into a metal tub, and then taking turns with your family, eldest to youngest, male to female. By the time you get in, the water is cloudy and tepid, and you do your best not to think about your brother's feet. Soap is expensive. Water is hard to heat. Baths are considered a health risk by some doctors, who still believe that exposing the skin to hot water might release miasma into your blood. So instead, you spot wash. Armpits, face, hands, maybe feet if you're lucky, and then cover the rest with perfume, vinegar, or layers of clothing designed to soak up the worst of it. And it works sort of. You now smell less like a garbage fire and more like a perfumed garbage fire. Your hair is unwashed. If you're a woman, you'll tie it up or braid it. If you're a man, you'll slick it down with oil or simply cover it with a cap and move on. Head lice? Normal. Dandruff? The least of your problems. Cleanliness is not about vanity here. It's about basic survival, because disease is everywhere. Typhoid, cholera, scarlet fever, tuberculosis, all waiting to latch onto unwashed hands and mouths. You've been told to wash, but there's little understanding of germs. Soap is used because it feels right, not because anyone knows what it's killing, and yet you manage. You scrape together enough decency to look half human. Your hair is tied back. Your collar is stiff with starch. You've scrubbed your hands in freezing water and wiped your face with a towel that used to be white. You're ready to face the day. You've eaten your gruel. You've rinsed with vinegar. You've splashed yourself with water that could double as soup stock. And now you stand at the front door, breathing in the thick morning air of coal, horse manure, wet stone, and human fatigue. You are as clean as a working-class Victorian citizen is ever going to be. And you haven't even started your job yet. You're standing in the entryway now, or rather, the patch of floor near the front door that occasionally gets swept when someone dies and there's company coming. Your morning routine is complete, such as it is, and now it's time to get dressed properly for the day. You're already wearing your undergarments, if you can call them that. A linen or flannel shirt, threadbare and yellowing at the collar, tucked into a pair of stiff wool trousers that have been patched so many times they're more stitching than fabric. Underwear exists, yes, but it's optional in your income bracket, and after one too many laundry days with frozen fingers and no soap, you may have given up on it altogether. Time to layer. First, a vest. Victorians call it a waistcoat, which is less fashion and more insulation. It's missing a button or two, and the inner lining is slowly trying to escape through the seams, but it's yours. Over that goes a jacket, heavy wool or cotton twill, depending on the season and your luck. It doesn't match anything else you own, but it keeps the wind from finding new ways to hurt you. On your feet, if you're lucky, a pair of hobnailed boots with soles still mostly intact. If not, it's a pair of cracked leather shoes held together with string, prayers, and foot rot. Socks are a distant memory. Holes have been patched with more holes, and the left one smells faintly like mildew and coal dust. You button up tight, not for style, but for survival. Victorian fashion is rigid literally. Your clothes don't flex or stretch or give. You are held in place by coarse seams, scratchy collars, and the knowledge that if you rip something, you'll be sewing it back together by candlelight tonight, using thread scavenged from old flour sacks. Now, if you're a woman, things are worse. Let's say you're dressing for the day as a working-class Victorian woman. You begin with a long, plain linen chemise that serves as both underlayer and nightdress. It absorbs sweat, catches lice, and is the closest thing to comfort you're going to wear today. Then comes the corset. Yes, even for working women. Not the tight-laced caricature you've seen in costume dramas, but still stiff, still constricting, still designed to make breathing a controlled activity and bending over an Olympic event. Over that, a petticoat or two, then your gown or skirt, depending on the decade. Wool, thick cotton, or repurposed upholstery, whatever you could afford or inherit. If you work outside the home, it's always dark-coloured, always heavy and always guaranteed to soak up every drop of street mud and horse droppings within a 5-mile radius. On your head, a bonnet or kerchief. To go bareheaded is improper. To go fashionable is impossible. And let's not forget your apron, tied tight, always filthy, and always being used to carry something. Potatoes, clothespins, a crying child. It's not decorative, it's functional armor. Clothing in the Victorian era doesn't change with the weather. It doesn't change with your mood. It changes when it physically falls apart. And even then, you unpick the seams, flip the fabric inside out, and make it last another year. Now that you're fully dressed and thoroughly encased in multiple layers of itchy, unwashed fabric, you glance back at your home, your shelter. Let's take a moment to appreciate it, shall we? Because shelter in the Victorian era was just as dangerous as everything else. Your house is a terraced home, one of thousands built quickly and cheaply during the great industrial boom. Developers churned them out by the mile, promising warmth and stability to workers flocking to the cities. What you got instead was a long row of red brick rectangles stacked like filing cabinets and built with the architectural philosophy of, it won't fall down today, probably. You live in 2, maybe 3 rooms. The front room, which doubles as kitchen, dining area and fever ward. A bedroom upstairs, shared with at least one sibling and possibly an aging relative. And if you're very lucky, a scullery out back, essentially a cupboard with a sink and a window that doesn't open. The walls are thin. You can hear everything your neighbors say. Arguments, prayers, childbirth, drunken snores. All of it bleeds through the plaster, which is beginning to flake in the corners thanks to the ever-present damp. Ah, yes, the damp. The true architect of the Victorian home. It curls your wallpaper. It blackens your ceiling. It ruins your bread, your bed, your bones. The walls never fully dry. The cold seeps in through every crack in the mortar, and the air smells faintly of rot no matter how many times you open the window, which you only do when you're trying to get rid of the smell of boiled cabbage and despair. And don't think you're safe upstairs. Your roof is slanted, tiled, and more theoretical than structural. Leaks are common. Pigeons occasionally nest in the rafters. In winter, the wind screams through the cracks. In summer, the heat rises and turns your bedroom into a slow-cooking coffin. And let's talk about fires. Open flames are everywhere. Candles, hearths, oil lamps. Each one a potential house-destroying disaster. Fire brigades exist, sort of, but they're private, often uncoordinated, and most of the time, they arrive just in time to watch your home collapse into smouldering memory. Chimneys are another nightmare. They're narrow, unlined, and prone to chimney fires, especially if you're too poor to hire a sweep. And if you do hire a sweep, you're likely to get a child yes, a child lowered into the flue with a brush and a prayer. The child might die of smoke inhalation or get stuck. If that happens, they cut him out from the outside, using brick. But hey, the house didn't burn down yet. Let's not forget the floor. It's bare wood or packed dirt, covered in straw perhaps, occasionally scrubbed, always cold. If you drop a potato, it becomes floor seasoning. If you drop a plate, you now have one fewer plate. The windows are small, single pane, frosted in winter. In summer, they let in the smells of the street, coal smoke, manure, spoiled fish, and whatever your neighbor is curing in a bucket by his front step. The doors don't lock well, the hinges squeak, the latch is loose, and outside is a street filled with factory noise, street vendors, coughing neighbors, stray dogs, and the occasional horse carcass waiting to be collected by the knackerman. You might have a back garden. If so, it's not for leisure. It's where you dump your ashes, hang your laundry, and keep a chicken if you're lucky. There is no grass, there are no flowers. Just mud, broken bricks, and the slowly sinking wood of your outdoor privy. This is your shelter, your refuge from the soot and sorrow of the Victorian world, and it's slowly trying to kill you. From the arsenic in the wallpaper, to the lead in the pipes, to the coal dust coating your lungs, every part of your home is working overtime to reduce your lifespan. But you know what? It's still better than the street. You have a roof most of the time, a fire when you can afford coal, a door when it hasn't swollen shut with rain, and at night when you lie in bed listening to the rats in the walls, the coughing next door, and the low whistle of wind through the cracks, you take a strange comfort in it all, because this is your home, and you made it another day. You step outside, and the first thing that hits you is the air. Not the crisp, clean kind that makes you feel alive. No, this is Victorian air, thick with coal smoke, horse droppings, chimney soot, and the faint but persistent aroma of pickled onions and dying dreams. It's not so much breathable as survivable. You inhale through your mouth and try not to think too much about what just settled on your tongue. Time to go to work. It's early. The sun has only just crawled above the rooftops, but the city is already alive, with motion and misery. Horses clop by, pulling carts piled high with coal, wood, and crates of rotting fish. Steam pours from factory chimneys like angry ghosts. Rag and bone men call out as they pass, their carts creaking beneath piles of junk and dead rats. And you're already late, because if you live in the Victorian era, you work. There are no weekends, no paid holidays, no sick leave, and no HR department, unless you are very wealthy or very dead. Your day is built around labor, grueling, unrelenting, soul-shaping labor. And your body isn't yours. It belongs to the factory, the field, the shop, or the street. Your survival depends on how long you can keep moving before you collapse. Let's say you're headed to the mill, a textile mill like the ones in Manchester or Leeds, massive brick buildings that loom over the streets like mechanical temples. You enter through tall iron gates where the foreman stands with a pocket watch and a stick. You clock in with your presence. There is no roll call. If you're not seen, you're fired, or docked pay, or replaced. Inside, the roar is deafening. Spinning machines, powered by belts and steam and rage, fill the space from wall to wall. The air is thick with lint, and the temperature is stifling. Your job is to monitor the thread, fix jams, or sweep the floor beneath moving gears. And you'd better be quick, because these machines do not stop. Not for you, not for anyone. Injuries are common. Fingers crushed, scalps torn by spinning bobbins, children crawling under machinery to retrieve dropped tools, only to get caught and pulled in. The term industrial accident hasn't been invented yet. You don't sue the mill. You apologize for bleeding on the floor. You work for 12 to 16 hours with a single break for your lunch. A cold meat pie or a heel of bread with dripping. You eat with blackened hands while sitting on a pile of thread. There's no water, no soap, no ventilation. Your lungs itch. Your eyes sting. You sneeze lint. And your clothes are slowly turning the same grey as the factory walls. Or maybe you're a coal miner. Then your morning looks like this. A 2-mile walk before dawn, followed by a descent down a vertical shaft held up by rotting timbers and divine mercy. You carry a lantern. You wear heavy boots. And your breath comes in tight, nervous gasps, because you know what happens when gas builds up and someone strikes a spark. Cave-ins, explosions, flooding. These are not distant possibilities. They're occupational hazards. You might go into the shaft with 20 men and come out with 17 or fewer. Or not at all. You dig for hours, pickaxe swinging, sweat dripping into your shirt until it turns to sludge. Your lungs fill with coal dust. Your hands blister. Your back screams. You pass boys, young boys, 12 or younger, dragging carts of coal with ropes across their shoulders. Their faces are black with soot. Their eyes look too old. And you think, at least I'm not pulling carts today. Or maybe you're a chimney sweep, in which case you're probably a child. Let's not pretend. The Victorian chimney sweep is almost always a child. Small enough to crawl into narrow flues, cheap enough to risk without guilt. You arrive at the job with nothing but a brush and a cough. You're shoved up the chimney, scraping soot with your elbows, knees and face. You can't see. You can't breathe. The walls are hot. The air is thick. And if you get stuck, you'll either be pulled out by your heels or not at all. You don't think about it. You can't. You just brush and cough and hope. Maybe you work in a match factory. You're a woman, most likely, or a girl. You spend your days dipping matchsticks into white phosphorus, a chemical that glows softly in the dark and eats your jawbone from the inside out. The condition is called phossy jaw. Your teeth ache. Your breath smells sweet and rotting. Your face swells. And then the bone begins to die. You don't complain. There's no one to complain to. Your pay is meager. The conditions are lethal. But you're still alive for now. Perhaps you're a costermonger, selling fruit or fish on the street from a wooden cart. You yell louder than everyone else because volume equals income. Your hands are red with cold. Your breath steams in the morning air. And your boots are wet. Always wet. You push your cart through crowded streets, dodging carriages, policemen and pickpockets. You shout until your throat gives out. You bargain. You curse. You smile. You endure. Because work isn't just a job. It's a fight every day. And if you're a domestic servant, then your labor is endless. You're awake before your employer. Before dawn. Before the fire has been lit. You scrub floors, polish boots, wash linens in freezing water, and haul coal up and down staircases until your knees give out. You don't speak unless spoken to. You don't eat at the table. You don't rest until the last candle has been extinguished upstairs. You are invisible, but your blisters are not. And if you're a woman working at home, you work anyway, mending, cooking, washing, boiling clothes in cauldrons, stirring them with wooden paddles while children scream and husbands sulk. You take in laundry for extra pennies. You scrub until your fingers crack. You try to stretch a stew made of turnips and imagination, because rest is for someone else. Maybe you don't have a job at all. Maybe you're one of the unlucky ones, cast off by a factory after an injury, or a widow with no skills the market wants. Then your work is begging, or picking oakum in a workhouse, or stitching until your eyesight goes. You do what you can, what you must, what the city demands of its poorest, because in the Victorian world, not working is not an option. You work, or you starve. And when the day finally ends after 14 hours of standing, bending, lifting, shouting, inhaling and enduring, you stumble home, body aching, mind fogged, heart hollow, and you get up again tomorrow, because this is life in the Victorian era. And work is the only thing keeping you alive. By the time the sun begins its slow, smoky descent behind a curtain of industrial haze, you're exhausted. Your hands are raw, your back is tight, your eyes sting from coal dust, and your stomach is already dreading the mystery stew that awaits. But before the fire is stoked and the bread is rationed, there's another force guiding your day. One even more powerful than your foreman: belief. The Victorian era isn't just smog and suffering. It's also a time of intense, often contradictory spiritual life. Religion, superstition, folklore, and emerging science all swirl together in the same cramped living room. And you, like most people of your class, live at the mercy of all of them. You begin the evening with a quiet prayer, or maybe a desperate one. Because even if you don't go to church every Sunday, God is everywhere, on your coins, in your daily greetings, in every sickness, death, harvest, accident, and pregnancy. The Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away. And sometimes the Lord sends a fever just to see what you'll do about it. You probably attend the local Church of England, or at least you say you do. It's the state religion, and not going is suspicious. Attendance is expected. Tithing is encouraged. Sin is never optional. If you're Catholic, you're already under a cloud of social suspicion. If you're Methodist or Baptist, you're fine, so long as you keep your chapel low profile and your beer intake lower. Church isn't just spiritual, it's social. It's where marriages begin, reputations are built, and children are judged. The vicar is both a moral authority and, occasionally, a part-time snitch. If you missed Sunday service, he knows, and so does the grocer, and the midwife, and your boss. Faith offers structure, comfort, but it also demands obedience. You must be pious, respectable, clean. Even if your boots are falling apart and you haven't had a proper bath in a month, you'd better show up looking penitent and ironed. There's no room for questions. Doubt is dangerous. Because Victorian religion isn't gentle, it's often fire and brimstone. Preachers warn of eternal damnation for Sabbath breaking, back-talking, skirt-raising, and showing your ankles in a moment of unguarded enthusiasm. Children are told they'll burn in hell for stealing bread. Women are warned that disobedience leads to spiritual ruin and also, somehow, bad hair. The world is full of moral traps, and if you fall into one, the consequences are eternal. But alongside the Bible and the hymns, there's another layer to your belief system. One older, stranger, superstition. Because even though science is on the rise, doctors are poking around with scalpels and thermometers, most of your neighbors still believe in curses, signs, and unseen forces. And so do you, even if you pretend not to. You don't walk under ladders. That's asking for a broken neck. You throw salt over your left shoulder, just in case the devil is lurking behind you. You touch wood. You don't spill pepper. You never, ever put new shoes on a table. And mirrors? Mirrors are portals. Break one, and that's 7 years of misery you absolutely cannot afford. Cover them when someone dies. If you don't, their soul might get trapped in the glass and haunt the parlor forever. If a bird flies into your house, someone's going to die. If a dog howls outside your door, someone already has. If you hear a knock in the night and no one's there, don't answer. Victorians live in a spiritual pressure cooker, and it gets weirder, because the same people who go to church every Sunday are also the ones secretly visiting the local spiritualist on Tuesday. Spiritualism is booming. Seances are popular in drawing rooms across the country, from dusty tenements to velvet-draped townhouses. People want to talk to the dead, not just remember them. Converse. You might know someone who's attended a seance. You might have tried it yourself. A table, a few candles, a medium with a 1,000-yard stare, and a possibly fake French accent, and then you all sit in silence, waiting for the knock, or the cold breeze, or the sound of little Timmy, who died of whooping cough last year, whispering through the gaslight. Is it real? Maybe, maybe not. But when you've buried 2 children, a brother, and your best friend from cholera in the last 5 years, you want to believe. Belief is all you have left. The Victorians adore the dead. They photograph them, pose with them, talk to them, wear lockets with their hair, craft elaborate mourning jewelry from teeth and bone. Black crepe and jet beads dominate wardrobes for years at a time. Grief is ritualized, codified. You don't just lose someone and move on. You mourn in stages, in public, in outfits. A widow might wear black for the rest of her life. A child might be buried with a doll. Every death comes with rules. If you're a woman, the rules are even stricter. Mourning periods are long. You don't laugh. You don't visit parties. You don't wear color. You avoid mirrors, ribbons, music. Even your underclothes are expected to be dark and sorrowful. Death is not an event. It's a lifestyle. And yet, despite all this formality, the spiritual world remains unpredictable. A knock at the window on a windy night could be just the breeze, or a banshee, a strange shadow near the fireplace, perhaps smoke, perhaps something older. That sudden chill in your bones could be a draft, or a warning. Witchcraft is out of fashion, technically, but plenty of people still whisper about the old women with strange herbs, the midwives with knowledge passed down in secret, the wise folk who keep to themselves and always seem to know when someone is going to die. You don't accuse them, but you also don't cross them. You tie a piece of red thread around your baby's wrist to ward off evil spirits. You keep a sprig of rosemary in your apron for luck. You never eat food left on your doorstep. You never answer a knock in the dead of night, because faith can only explain so much. The rest? That belongs to the shadows. And then there are the little rituals, the quiet acts of belief that thread through every moment. You kiss the cross hanging on your wall. You say a prayer before stepping into the street. You avoid the number 13. You tap the side of the bed 3 times before sleep to keep the nightmares out. And maybe, just maybe, you believe the dead don't rest easy. Maybe you've heard the stories of ghosts on the stairwell, of the woman in white who weeps by the lamplight, of the boy who drowned in the river and still knocks on doors during storm. You don't need to believe everything, but it doesn't hurt to act like you do, because in a world where medicine barely functions, where poverty is a death sentence, and where life can be taken by a puddle of bad water or a sneeze from the wrong stranger, belief is protection. It's structure, it's comfort, it's control. So you cross yourself before bed. You light a candle for the friend who died last week. You avoid the alley where the air always feels too cold. And when someone you love is sick, you don't just pray. You place iron scissors under their bed. You open the window to let the soul escape just in case. You sprinkle salt on the doorstep to keep spirits from entering. You listen for the knock, the breath, the whisper. Because here, in the Victorian world, you don't just survive the physical, you survive the unseen. It's evening now, and your body is aching in places you didn't even know could ache. Your fingernails are black, your shoulders are tight, your brain feels like it's been scrubbed with steel wool and left out to dry in factory smoke, and yet somehow you're hungry, which is unfortunate, because Victorian meals, especially for the working class, are not designed for indulgence. They are designed for survival, and occasionally, if fortune smiles, for bland comfort. You arrive home, kick off your boots more out of habit than hygiene, and enter a kitchen that still smells like boiled cabbage from 3 days ago. The fire is low, the pot is already simmering, and you don't need to ask what's in it, because it's always the same: stew. If you're lucky, mutton. If you're less lucky, questionable beef. If you're truly cursed, no meat at all, just a few turnips, 2 suspicious potatoes, some onion peels, and the ghost of a carrot someone saw at the market last week. The stew has been cooked 3 times this week, not because it's good, because it has to last. You ladle a portion into a cracked bowl, careful to avoid the floating grey film that always seems to form on top. The texture is somewhere between soup and regret. You chew slowly, or quickly. It doesn't matter. It tastes like boiled things. That's as specific as you can get. Bread, if you have it, is dense, hard, maybe mouldy. You scrape off the worst of the blue spots and pretend not to notice the crunch that might be weevils. You dip it in your stew and tell yourself it's protein. There is no dessert. Not unless someone's made suet pudding, which is essentially flour, fat, and the stubborn refusal to die of hunger. Sweet, if there's sugar. More likely, it's savory, filled with organ meat or onions, and steamed into a damp, dense dome that could be used as a weapon if necessary. Drinks? Water is a gamble. In cities like London, it's often drawn straight from the Thames or filtered through a network of pipes that pass within kissing distance of open sewers. It might taste of iron, soap, or nothing at all, which is somehow more suspicious. To be safe, you boil it, or you don't drink it at all. Instead, you reach for the safer option, beer. Yes, even children drink beer. Weak beer, table beer, small beer, brewed to be just alcoholic enough to kill bacteria, but not enough to knock you out unless you've had a long day and a short meal. Then it might hit harder than you expect. If you're feeling fancy and rich, you might have tea, but real tea is expensive. What you're drinking is probably reused leaves, stretched thin with milk, if you have any, and sweetened with treacle or a lump of sugar that looks like it's been through several other households before reaching yours. And that's dinner. Now, onto the Victorian version of entertainment. You don't have a radio, you don't have a record player, you don't have Wi-Fi, Netflix, or a podcast about 18th century tax policy to put you to sleep. What you have is whoever's in the room with you and the things they're willing to do for distraction. If you're a child, you might play with a rag doll, a hoop, or a knuckle bone you found on the street. If you're an adult, you sit, you talk, you complain, you read, if you can read, or you listen to someone who can. Storytelling is currency. Ghost stories are always popular. So are tales of scandal, who's pregnant, who got fired, who's being investigated by the parish for moral irregularities. You gossip in whispers, not because you're ashamed, but because the walls are thin and the neighbours are likely doing the same about you. If you have a penny or two to spare and you're feeling bold, you might visit a tavern. Taverns are loud, smoky, cramped, and full of desperate people pretending they aren't. You elbow your way to the bar, order a pint of bitter, and find a stool that hasn't been broken in half by a previous disagreement. The beer is flat. The bread is hard. The atmosphere is electric. Men argue about politics. Women shout about wages. Someone plays a fiddle badly in the corner. A fight breaks out over an unpaid debt or an accidental glance. The landlord pretends not to notice unless furniture is involved. Then you're thrown out with a broom and a warning. You leave with a black eye and a story. That's a good night. If you're more respectable or pretending to be, you might attend a music hall. Music halls are the heart of popular entertainment. Cheap tickets, bright lights, and acts that range from comedy and magic to juggling, burlesque, or operatic ballads. You sit in a folding chair next to someone who smells like pickled eggs, and you laugh, not because the jokes are good, but because it feels good to laugh at anything. For the upper classes, there are theatres, of course. Shakespeare, tragedy, Gilbert and Sullivan. You won't be going unless you're working backstage or selling programs. But you hear about it from a friend who empties chamber pots in the stalls. If you're religious or just tired, you might go to an evening prayer service. Church is oddly a form of entertainment. It's warm-ish. It's orderly. It has candles. And you get to sing without anyone accusing you of disturbing the neighbours. The sermon is fire and brimstone, but the pew is solid, and you can rest your eyes if the vicar isn't watching too closely. And then there are the seasonal entertainments. Fairs are noisy, chaotic, and irresistible. There are strongmen, acrobats, dancing bears, and street vendors selling food that will almost certainly make you ill. Roasted chestnuts, eels on sticks, meat pies with mystery fillings. You eat, you cheer, you dodge pickpockets and children running wild through the crowd. Markets are a daily theatre of their own. Vendors shout over one another. Fishmongers wave fillets like flags. Bakers display loaves that shrink slightly when you touch them. You haggle, you argue, you pretend to leave so the price drops, and you go home with something vaguely edible and a bruise from someone's cart. And if you can't afford fairs or pubs or music halls, you stay home and do what everyone does when money runs out. You sing old songs, work songs, drinking songs, nursery rhymes that make no sense but feel right in your bones. Songs your grandmother taught you, songs no one wrote down but everyone somehow knows. You don't sing well, but you sing loud, and for a brief moment, your world is warm. So yes, the food is awful, the drink is weak, the bread is stale, the stew is grey, but you have your family, your voice, your neighbour who tells stories like he's lived 3 lifetimes, and all of them ended in scandal. You have laughter, you have music, you have one more evening survived. And when the candles are snuffed and the fire burns low, you smile, just a little. Because even in the soot, the sorrow, and the stomach cramps, there is still joy. And sometimes, that's enough. You wake up coughing. Not a polite cough. Not the clear your throat before breakfast kind of cough. This one rattles your lungs like an old chimney being cleaned by an angry ghost. You taste soot. Your ribs ache. And worst of all, no one in the house even turns their head anymore when they hear it. Because everyone is coughing. It's just normal. Victorian life is soaked in illness. It clings to the walls like damp. It drips from the ceiling with every leap. It walks beside you in the street, brushes past you in the factory, and sits at the table like an uninvited dinner guest you've learned not to make eye contact with. There's no escaping it. Your neighbours are pale. Gaunt is fashionable now, partly because rich people think it looks refined, and partly because everyone's bodies are slowly collapsing from malnutrition, disease, or both. You look in the mirror and notice the purple hollows beneath your eyes. You're 30, but your lungs feel 70. Your breath wheezes at the edges. A fever burns behind your temples, but you still get dressed, still go to work, because what else can you do? No one stops working because they're ill. You work until you die. And in this world, that moment might arrive much sooner than you think. Let's start with the obvious enemies. The big killers. Tuberculosis. Consumption, they call it. Romantic in the novels. Horrifying in reality. You've seen what it does. Thin, ghostly people coughing up blood into lace handkerchiefs until they vanish entirely. It spreads through air, through breath, through touch. It kills slowly, intimately. Cholera, quicker, uglier. One moment you feel fine, the next you're curled on the floor with cramps so violent you can't scream. Then vomiting, then diarrhea, then silence. It doesn't care who you are. It moves with the water supply, and that water is shared by thousands. Typhus, typhoid, scarlet fever, diphtheria, smallpox. You don't always know what's hit someone until they're gone. The names blend together. They all sound like plagues. They are. And if none of those get you, there's always the quiet common killers. Infected cuts, abscessed teeth, childbirth, rat bites, or a chill that settles in your chest and refuses to leave. There is no concept of germs, at least not where you live. Some scientists are whispering about invisible things that cause disease, but most doctors still believe in miasma, bad air, foul odours. That's why they stuff herbs in their pockets and wave vinegar-soaked cloths over your face when you collapse. The cure for bad air? Open a window and pray. When you do fall ill, and you will, your first stop isn't always the doctor. It might be your grandmother or the neighbor 3 doors down who knows things. She gives you a tonic made of herbs, vinegar, molasses, and whatever she scraped from under the stove. You drink it. You gag. You hope. Sometimes it works. More often, it doesn't. So you go to the apothecary, a tiny shop crammed with glass bottles, mysterious powders, dried roots, and the distinct smell of regret. The man behind the counter wears spectacles and speaks like he's read every book in Latin, but he'll also sell you arsenic toothpaste and morphine lozenges without blinking. You ask for something to stop the pain in your gut. He gives you laudanum, a mixture of alcohol and opium. You drink it. You sleep deeply, too deeply. You wake up feeling worse, but quieter. Maybe you take more. That's how it starts. Victorian medicine has no regulations, no FDA, no prescription pad. You can buy cocaine for your toothache, heroin for your nerves, and opium for your teething child. You think that's an exaggeration. It's not. They sell Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup for fussy infants. It's pure morphine. The baby sleeps. Forever, sometimes. But maybe you don't go to the apothecary. Maybe you're sent to a doctor. And that's when things get really dangerous. The Victorian doctor is a figure of confidence, experience, and stunning guesswork. He arrives in a coat he hasn't washed since the last patient died, carrying a bag filled with blunt instruments and boundless optimism. He checks your pulse with a shaky hand, asks what you've eaten, frowns deeply, and prescribes you the only treatment he trusts: bleeding. He pulls out the leeches, or the lancet, or just uses his own hands to find a vein and drain a pint or two of your already struggling blood. The idea is simple. Too much blood causes imbalance. Drain it, and the body resets. That's the theory. Does it work? Let's just say it's consistent. If the bleeding doesn't fix you, he might try cupping, or mustard plasters, or poultices made from bread and milk. You might be forced to drink mercury, or swallow coal tar, or sit in a bath of vinegar and lemon while being slapped repeatedly with a hot towel. If you're really ill, he might recommend amputation. It doesn't matter if you're dealing with gangrene or a broken toe. If it looks bad, off it comes. There's no anesthesia unless you're lucky enough to be near one of the new hospitals experimenting with chloroform or ether. Otherwise, it's just 2 strong men to hold you down and a nurse to muffle the screams. Sometimes you survive. Sometimes they amputate the wrong part. And heaven help you if you're a woman. Most female ailments are explained away with one word: hysteria. The uterus, you see, is considered a wandering organ. Mysterious, untrustworthy. If you're too emotional, it's your womb. If you're too tired, it's your womb. If you read too much or want to vote, definitely the womb. Treatments for hysteria range from cold baths and isolation to, believe it or not, pelvic massage administered by a doctor, which is exactly what it sounds like. Eventually, they invent the vibrator just to save their wrists the strain. And if you're a woman in labor, you go into a dark room with a midwife and hope your child isn't breech, your pelvis is wide enough, and that you don't bleed too much afterward. There's no prenatal care, no pain relief, just rags, boiling water, and whispered prayers. Childbirth kills so many women, they don't even bother to question it anymore. If you're poor, and of course you don't go to the nice hospital. You go to the charity hospital or the workhouse infirmary, where the walls stink of disinfectant, the windows are nailed shut, and every bed has a story that ends badly. You lie next to strangers in various states of disintegration and wait your turn. If you're dying, you're moved to the far end of the room, near the curtain. If the curtain is drawn, you're not expected to last the night. The nurses do their best. They're overworked, underpaid, and deeply haunted. And even if you survive your illness, the fear of death never leaves. It's everywhere. Children die of croup in their sleep. Men drop dead from a sore that won't heal. Women vanish after childbirth. 1 minute they're laughing. The next, they're buried in the churchyard, wrapped in their best dress and lowered into the dirt with a few words and a lot of tears. You go to funerals weekly. You wear black constantly. You keep a bottle of smelling salts in your apron and a lock of someone's hair in your locket. You talk about death like it's a guest who's always on the way, but never rude enough to give notice. So you light a candle. You burn sage. You leave a window open when someone is sick. You pray. You wrap iron around your baby's wrist. You draw the curtains when the hearse passes. And still, in the Victorian world, death is not a stranger. He is your neighbour, sometimes quiet, sometimes kind, but never far. Evening has settled in. The streets are quieter now, except for the occasional clatter of a drunken cartwheel or a constable's boots echoing between alleyways. Your stomach is just full enough not to ache. Your hands have stopped shaking, but rest. That's a luxury for someone else. Because for Victorian women and children, the day doesn't end when the work whistle blows. That's just phase 1. Back home, the next shift begins. Let's start with women. To be a woman in the Victorian era is to be invisible and indispensable all at once. You do everything: cook, clean, mend, nurse, discipline, budget, serve, and you do it in silence. Your worth is measured in modesty, obedience, and how quietly you can manage your own exhaustion. If you're married, your life revolves around maintaining the household, which sounds respectable until you realize that household means an endless, unpaid job that includes hauling water, scrubbing floors with lye, hand-washing clothes in a freezing scullery, and preparing meals with food that may or may not have gone off 3 days ago. Your hands are cracked from boiling laundry. Your back aches from lifting coal buckets. You have children, possibly 5 or 6, possibly more, and none of them are old enough to help without breaking something or catching a fever. There is no such thing as a stay-at-home mum. You work even if you never leave the house. And if you're lucky enough to have a job on top of your domestic duties like taking in laundry, sewing piecework, or cleaning for wealthier families, then you do both without complaint, because complaining makes you a nag. You are expected to smile, to be grateful, to hold the entire family together with a patchwork of unpaid labor and sheer force of will. If your husband is decent, maybe he helps. If he isn't, if he drinks too much, shouts too loud, or disappears for days, you still do the work. You feed the children, you hide the bruises, you whisper apologies to the neighbors and cook the same 3 meals on rotation until someone brings home something better. And if you're not married, you're suspicious, watched, whispered about. Maybe you're a spinster, a word that sounds like mildew, or a woman of loose morals, which can mean anything from walking alone at night to being seen talking to the wrong man. Your body isn't yours. Your name isn't safe. The rules are written by people who don't live like you. But perhaps the hardest part of womanhood in this time is childbirth. You don't just bring children into the world, you do it with no pain relief, in a cramped room, surrounded by worry. You bleed, sometimes too much. You tear, and there are no stitches. You cry, and people tell you to be quiet, or you'll scare the other children. Some women die. Some wish they had. And those who survive? They get up the next morning and start sweeping. Then there are the children. Sweet, innocent, expendable. Childhood, as you think of it now, doesn't exist yet. Not for the poor. If you're old enough to walk without falling over, you're old enough to work. Maybe you sell matches in the street. Maybe you shine shoes. Maybe you follow your mother to the laundry and help wring out shirts until your hands blister. Or maybe you go to the factory where your small fingers are just the right size to reach into dangerous places. If you're lucky, your job is simple: running errands, carrying baskets, minding younger siblings. But if you're not, you work in mines, mills, and chimney flues. Long hours, dangerous conditions, no breaks, no childhood. The government says you must go to school, but only until age 10. And even then, only if the family can afford to let you lose the day's wages. So school is often skipped. Reading is a luxury. Writing is rare. Most children grow up knowing only what they need to survive, and some don't grow up at all. Child mortality is staggering. Entire families lose half their children before they reach 5. Common causes: diarrhea, fever, infections, starvation, or accidents involving horses, carts, or open fires. Some babies die of cold before their first winter is done. Some are smothered in bed when sleeping between 2 siblings in a shared cot. Some drink bad milk. Some eat spoiled food. Some catch scarlet fever and are gone in 3 days. And through it all, no one dares get too comfortable. Children are loved. Of course they are. But that love is wrapped in fear. You keep your distance emotionally. You try not to spoil them. You try not to look too long at the baby in case you wake up one morning and they're not breathing. Grief is not a one-time thing. It's repetitive. And no matter how many times it happens, it still hurts like the first. And then there's the family unit itself, held together with twine, lies, and necessity. The home is small, overcrowded. Privacy doesn't exist. Every argument is overheard. Every secret is shared. Everyone sleeps in the same room or at least within shouting distance. You share beds. You share illnesses. You share chores, food, and disappointments. If you're the eldest child, you help raise the younger ones. If you're the youngest, you learn early not to ask for too much. Everyone pulls weight. Everyone carries burdens. There is no me time. There's only we survive, or we don't. Fathers are distant or exhausted. They drink to forget. They work to the bone. Some are kind, some are cruel. Some disappear for weeks at a time and return with nothing but a story and a bruise on their cheek. Mothers bear the load, the emotional weight, the cooking, the teaching, the crying in silence so the children won't hear. And yet, somehow, there is love. There are jokes whispered before bed, secret candies, old songs hummed while mending shirts, a worn book passed between tired hands, a fire that crackles just enough to make the room feel safe for a little while. Sometimes the family is joined by a grandparent, sleeping in the corner bed with a cough that never stops, or an orphaned cousin taken in after their parents died of fever, or a lodger paying rent in silence, adding their own story to the house's collective ache. The family grows, shrinks, changes, but the work never stops. And the love, when it shows up, feels like salvation. You may have no money, no education, no rest, no future beyond the next week. But you have them: your mother's steady hand, your brother's terrible singing, your sister's soft snoring in the bed beside you. And tonight, as you tuck the blanket tighter, ignore the chill, and close your eyes against the dark, you feel something rare and real. You're still here, and that is more than enough. The sun, if you can call it that, is barely visible, filtered through layers of coal smoke, factory soot, and cloud. It's late afternoon now, that strange, sullen hour where the air feels heavier and the city begins to tighten its grip around you again. You've made it through the hardest work of the day, but rest is still miles away. Because in the Victorian world, the labour may end for some, but the struggles do not. As you make your way home, or to the market, or to your second job, you pass people who look a lot like you. Bent backs, tired eyes, shoes flapping open at the soles. You nod. You don't smile. Smiles are too expensive. You pass children fighting over an apple core in the gutter. A man passed out against a wall, a bottle of gin still clutched in his hand. Two women shouting at each other over a spilled basket of coal, a dog dragging a piece of what you hope is meat. It's just another afternoon, and the closer you live to the edge, the thinner your wages. The harder your labor, the more you live surrounded by conflict. Social conflict in the Victorian world is not abstract. It's not a debate in Parliament or a pamphlet handed out on a street corner. It's real, immediate, physical, often violent. And it plays out in 100 tiny moments between noon and nightfall. You see it in the class divide. First and foremost, you're poor, working class. Maybe just one step above a pauper, maybe below one. You know your place because the system is designed to make sure you never forget it. You walk on the muddy side of the road. You tip your hat to strangers better dressed than you. You lower your voice when constables walk by. You don't linger too long outside a bakery or a dressmaker's window or any place you can't afford to enter. Rich people glide past in carriages with velvet curtains. Their boots are polished. Their coats are lined with fur. They carry umbrellas that haven't been turned inside out by the wind. They don't notice you, and when they do, it's with a look that says, quite clearly, you don't belong, because you don't. They live in houses with gas lighting, warm fires, and dinner bells. You live in a drafty room with a cracked chamber pot and a pile of firewood stolen from the dockyard. You're reminded every day, this is not your city. You're allowed to live in it, yes, but only in the margins, only as long as you behave. And what happens when you don't? Well, that depends on who sees you. Crime is everywhere in Victorian cities, not because people are wicked, but because people are hungry, desperate, tired of the rules. Sometimes it's a loaf of bread. Sometimes it's a silk handkerchief lifted from a distracted gentleman's pocket. Sometimes it's coal or buttons or shoes off the feet of a dead man in the gutter. You do what you must, but the law? The law doesn't care why. It only cares that you did. Theft can get you jailed, or worse, transported. That's the term they use when they send people to Australia for stealing buttons or spoons. A one-way ticket to a continent you've never seen, for the crime of being hungry in the wrong part of town. Or maybe it's prison, a cold, brutal place where silence is mandatory and hard labor is constant. You'll crush rocks, pick oakum, or walk the treadwheel, a giant rotating staircase you climb for 8 hours a day, going nowhere. And even when your sentence is over, the shame stays with you, a record, a mark, a reputation. In the eyes of society, you're not a reformed man. You're a tainted one. And the police, well, they're not there to protect you. They're there to protect property. They patrol the nicer streets, the banks, the warehouses. They show up after fights have ended, after thefts have failed, after bodies have already cooled in alleyways. They carry truncheons. Some carry pistols. And they ask questions only if you're clean, calm, and middle class. You, they don't ask. They assume if you protest, you're resisting. If you run, you're guilty. If you stand still, you're loitering. Justice bends toward wealth. Always has. And then there's the conflict that lives inside the home. Afternoons are when tempers fray. Fathers return from work in silence or worse, in drink. The gin shops do steady business after 2 o'clock. Mothers pull children back by the collar to avoid a slap. Arguments break out over coin, over burnt food, over nothing at all. There are no therapists, no interventions, no safe spaces, just loud voices, thin walls, and a city that doesn't hear you scream unless something breaks. Domestic violence is common. It's not talked about. It's not reported. It's just endured. Women are taught to keep their husbands happy. Children are taught to stay out of the way. And neighbors? They might check in, or they might turn up the radio if they're rich enough to have one. And what about the workplace? Well, that's another battlefield. Workers argue with overseers. Apprentices fight to keep their jobs from younger, cheaper boys. Men are fired for sneezing too loudly or asking for an extra crust of bread. Unions are rising slowly, but they're not yet strong. And joining one might get you blacklisted, so you swallow your anger until someone else explodes. Fistfights break out in the street over shillings, spilled beer, or a crooked game of cards. Women scream at each other over laundry lines. Children scuffle in the alleyways with the intensity of grown men. And yet, somehow, the city keeps moving. Of course, some conflicts aren't spoken aloud. They simmer in the eyes, the sideways glances, the whispers. A girl comes home late. A boy is seen kissing another boy in the shadows. A widow begins dressing in color too soon. A man stops going to church. The community notices. The community always notices. You are expected to conform, even if no one tells you the rules. Don't look too proud. Don't look too poor. Don't look like you're trying. Don't ask for more. Don't draw attention. Don't stand out. Because standing out gets you talked about, and being talked about gets you trouble. And yet, despite all this, people help each other. A neighbor watches your child while you run to the butcher. Someone shares their coal. A girl stitches your hem without charging a penny. An old man helps carry your broken chair back from the market just because he can. There's solidarity among the poor, a kind of unspoken loyalty that rises in the gaps left behind by a system designed to forget you. But even that has its limits. When things get truly bad, when the landlord raises the rent or the factory shortens hours or the river floods your home, and no one from the city council lifts a finger, then anger boils over into riots. Stones are thrown, shops are smashed, banners are raised, sometimes handwritten in chalk on broken walls, and for one day, just one, you feel like someone sees you, until the constables arrive. Then it's back to the shadows. So as the afternoon stretches toward evening and the city lights begin to flicker in gaslit halos, you take a deep breath, trying not to inhale too much of the smoke, and walk home. You've avoided arrest. You've dodged fights. You haven't shouted back. You've survived another fragile afternoon in a world built on imbalance. And that, in Victorian times, is an accomplishment all on its own. Evening falls over the city like a slow exhale, and then the darkness rolls in, thick and oily, swallowing the narrow streets in silence and smoke. You might think the worst part of the day is over. You've worked, eaten, endured. You've stitched your shoes back together and tucked your children into bed. You've burned your fingers relighting the fire and counted out the last crumbs of bread for tomorrow's meal. But no, the night is worse. Because when the sun goes down in the Victorian world, the shadows take over. And those shadows don't bring rest. They bring fear. It starts with the silent, not real silence. There's always the creak of old beams, the groan of wagons still rattling across cobblestones, the occasional cry in the street, but a deeper quiet, a thickening of the air, as if the city itself is holding its breath. You light a candle, a stub of wax, smoky and flickering. There's no electricity, no switches to flip, just fire, always fire. You know the danger. An untended candle can turn your whole tenement into a funeral pyre. But there's no other way to see your hands. Gaslight exists in wealthier homes, of course. Even street lamps glow in some parts of the city. But in your neighborhood, those lamps are few, far between, and so poorly maintained, they sputter like dying stars. You keep the flame low to save wax. And because the flickering edges of light are safer than full brightness, too much light attracts attention. Too little invites the unknown. You shut the curtains, as if that will stop anything, because at night, everything feels fragile. First, there's crime, pickpockets, cut purses, burglars. They all favor the dark. Your lock is weak, your door doesn't latch properly. If someone wants to get in, they will. A sharp shoulder or a quiet shove, and suddenly your home is not your own. And that's if they only want your coin. Some thieves take more. Women walk home quickly, heads down, keys between their fingers if they have keys. Girls cross themselves when they hear footsteps behind them. Boys form groups after work, not because they're friends, but because safety in numbers isn't just a saying, it's survival. You've heard the stories. A woman pulled into an alley, a man stabbed over a crust of bread, a child found in the river with rocks in his pockets. You've seen the aftermath. You've helped scrub blood from cobblestone. You know better than to be out after dark. But sometimes you have no choice. Then there's the cold. Nights are damp and cruel. The fire goes out too quickly. The wind finds every crack in the wall. You layer what you can, blankets, coats, newspaper under your shirt, but the chill seeps in anyway, burrowing into your bones. If you're old, the cold is a sentence. If you're sick, it's a final word. You curl up with your family, pressed together like books on a shelf, trying to share warmth that isn't there. One child coughs, another whimpers in their sleep. You pretend not to hear. You think of your neighbour, old Mrs. Pratt, who didn't answer her door yesterday. You wonder if she froze. You wonder if she was alone. You wonder who will notice. Then come the noises. Footsteps above, rats in the wall, a baby crying in the next flat over. You tell yourself it's just the house settling, but you don't believe it. Because sometimes things move in the night. Things with human shapes and inhuman motives. Men who knock on doors without saying a word. Figures seen through fogged glass. A shadow standing too long at the end of the street. Superstition never sleeps. If anything, it grows teeth after sunset. The old woman down the lane swears she saw a ghost last week, her dead husband, standing in the corner of her kitchen, soaking wet and smiling. She hasn't eaten since. Someone else claims their child was touched by a hag in their sleep, woke up screaming, unable to breathe, with scratch marks on his chest. You laugh about it during the day, but at night, you double-check the window latch. You toss salt on the doorstep. You turn your shoes upside down before bed, so no wandering spirit follows the scent of your feet and slips into your dreams. But the greatest fear of night, the one that hangs heaviest over every home, every bed, every whispered prayer, is the fear of death. Because death loves the night. It's when the fevers spike, when the breath gets shallower, when the bleeding won't stop. You sit beside someone and hold their hand, and with each hour, you feel the grip loosen. There is no ambulance. There is no emergency number. There is no help coming. Only you, a damp cloth, a cracked cup, a whispered hymn. You've seen people die in the dark. It happens quietly, sometimes. A sigh, a tremble, a moment of stillness too long. Other times, it's loud, terrifying. Someone screaming in agony while the rest of the household tries not to wake the baby. And then there's the waking, when you roll over and realize the person beside you isn't breathing. When a child doesn't stir, when the old man in the corner bed hasn't snored once all night, you rise in silence. You open the window to let the soul escape. You light a candle and place it near the body. You cover the mirror. You cover the face. There is a ritual, not out of religion though, that plays a part, but because ritual is all you have. It gives the moment shape. It tells you what to do. Because grief in the Victorian world is not a shock, it's a chronic condition. You always expect someone to die. You just hope it's not tonight. And through it all, you try to sleep. On a straw mattress, wrapped in scratchy wool, sharing the bed with siblings, children, or both. You lie on your side, to save space. You hold your breath when someone coughs. You pray your body is too tired to dream. The mattress creaks. The wind howls. The fire dies. Sleep comes in bursts. Sometimes you wake up soaked in sweat. Sometimes you dream of drowning. Sometimes you dream of the person you lost last month, smiling at you across the table. Mouth moving, but no sound coming out. You miss them. You miss all of them. And yet, there are moments, soft ones, your daughter's hand wrapped around your finger, the warmth of a foot pressed against your ankle, the rhythmic breathing of someone you love, still here, still alive. You close your eyes and try to hold on to that, because even in the dark, even in this dangerous, unforgiving night, you find something that feels like peace. Maybe it's just exhaustion, maybe it's hope, but for now, you rest. Lightly, cautiously, with one ear, always listening. Because in the Victorian night, sleep is not a right, it's a risk. And now, you're lying in bed. The candle has burned down to a flickering stub. The last embers in the hearth glow like watchful eyes in the dark. Outside, the city murmurs, a cart rattles on loose cobblestones. A drunk curses the night. A dog barks once, then disappears into silence. You're tired, in your bones, in your back, behind your eyes. The kind of tired that goes beyond sleep and settles deep into your spirit. And still, you made it through the day. You survived Victorian life. That, on its own, is a feat. Tonight, your mattress feels a little softer than it did this morning. Or maybe your body has simply given up protesting. The straw pokes through in familiar places, but you've learned how to shift your weight just right. The blanket is heavy and damp, but it's warm now, warmed by breath and body and repetition. The room around you is still. The air smells faintly of soot, smoke, boiled onions, and the quiet sweat of exhaustion. The others in your household are asleep, or trying to be. There's the sound of someone breathing just a bit too fast, maybe dreaming. A baby whimpers. You wait to see if it will grow louder. It doesn't. A foot kicks in sleep. Someone murmurs a prayer. Someone else snores. You close your eyes. And you remember the day. You remember waking up to a world of chill and grime. The damp mattress. The rough blanket. The mold in the corners of the room and the rats in the walls. You remember the cold water against your skin as you tried to wash with fingers gone stiff. You remember the taste of gruel, lukewarm, flavorless, barely food. You remember tying on your layers of stiff woolen clothing. The boots with the hole. The coat that no longer closes all the way. You remember stepping outside and being hit by the wall of smoke, manure, and morning noise. And then, the labor. Hard, long, unrelenting. Your body bent to tasks too heavy for one set of shoulders. You endured machines that don't care if they catch your sleeve. Overseers who don't care if you collapse. And hours that stretch on like punishment. You swallowed soot. You blinked through lint. You walked miles. You carried more than your weight. And still, you came home. Back through streets lined with hunger and voices and faces just like yours, haunted and hollow, but still moving forward. You remember the meal, the stew that stuck to your teeth, the bread you chewed carefully, hoping not to break a tooth on a stone or a beetle, the beer that was mostly water, but better than the water itself. You remember the sound of the city in the evening, fiddles from a nearby tavern, boots in puddles, coughing from behind closed doors. You remember the child who fell in the street, and the woman who carried her away like it was normal. Because it is. You remember the quiet, the creaks, the dark. And now, as your breathing slows, and the fire dies to ash, you remember something else. How much easier life is now, compared to then. Because the truth is, you don't actually live in the Victorian era. You're warm, in your own bed. You have clean sheets. You probably have running water just a few steps away. Toothpaste. a toilet, a shower, food in the fridge. You may even have lights that turn on with a switch, music on demand, central heating, a soft pillow, a door that locks, clean air. You live in a world where pain is treatable, where medicine works, where doctors don't bleed you with knives or ask about your humours. A world where childbirth doesn't automatically mean a funeral, where a child's cough doesn't keep the whole house awake with dread. You can go outside without stepping into sewage. You can eat without checking for worms or weevils or mold. You can really sleep without fear of rats chewing at your toes or fire claiming your roof. It's so easy to forget how far we've come, how every ordinary comfort is, by historical standards, a miracle. Because for most of human history, life was like this: brutal, dirty, unfair, and dangerously short. Victorian England was not a romantic haze of corsets and candlelight. It was a long daily negotiation with suffering. People didn't live so much as endure. They loved, they worked, they carried on, but always under pressure, always under threat. And yet there was beauty, not the kind written about in books or hung in galleries, but the kind you find in survival, in a mother's worn hands cradling a baby, in a street singer's voice cutting through the smog, in the smell of bread, even when it's stale, in laughter shared on the cold steps of a tenement. People found joy somehow. And now, as your body sinks deeper into rest, and your breath begins to match the slow rhythm of the night, you feel something strange. A quiet kind of gratitude. Gratitude for the softness of your blanket, for the silence in your home, for the hum of a fan, the glow of a screen, for the fact that you will wake up tomorrow without fleas. It's okay to feel grateful, even for the smallest thing, because those small things are exactly what the Victorians lived without, and what they would have given anything to have just one night like this. So tonight, as you lie in the dark, eyes closed, body still, drifting gently towards sleep, let your mind rest too. You've walked through the streets, you've tasted the fear, you've heard the coughs, you've bent your back beneath the weight of history, and now it's over. No factory whistle, no chamber pot, no soot in your lungs, no rats in your sheets. Only calm, only quiet, only now. You've made it through one of the harshest periods in modern history, and all you had to do was close your eyes and listen. So tonight, as you drift off, remember, you don't have to wake up in Victorian England. Sleep well,